Finding Laura Buggs, Chapter 26, page 173. Myron Wilbershire had become a crafty hibernating bear. His refusal to answer the door. I spent the next week, every chance I got, knocking on his door and ringing the doorbell, but he wouldn't come out. My mother was getting suspicious of why I was late for supper so often, and I'd chatter about my clubs and boys and try not to lie. "I know you're in there," I'd shout. It finally dawned on me he was taking a different route home, probably walking over Pierce or Adeline and coming down the alley in the back door. But it wouldn't work. It only made me madder and more determined. He'd lied, and now I had proof. He knew what happened to my mother, and I'd get it out of him if I had to pitch a tent on his porch. On Friday, I loitered at the corner of University and Snelling, playing a hunch, and it paid off. Myron got off the University streetcar and lumbered up Snelling to Roblin. Then he trudged down Roblin and cut up the alley to his house. I ran up to catch him. The alley hadn't been plowed after the blizzard we had on Wednesday, and it was rutted with tire tracks, and the snow was wet and slippery. He turned his large head when he heard me behind him. When he saw who it was, he just kept on slogging down the alley. "I know you didn't tell the truth, Myron Wilbershire," I said, and I kept pace with him, about 10 feet behind him. "I talked to your neighbor. She told me she remembers my mother living with you, and the baby girl too, and I want to know what happened to my mother, and I'm going to follow you until you tell me or you're in your grave, whichever comes first." He didn't hurry, throwing one large arm and then leg, as if he was pressing into a hurricane. He turned into his yard without looking back and escaped through the back door. The large two-story garage had two doors for cars. One looked used, the other hadn't been opened in a century. I peered into the side window and saw a big car, but it was dark and I couldn't make out much of it. I walked down the alley and circled around to the front of the house. It was the night of the mid-commencement dance, and Jim was picking me up at 8, and it was already past 6, but I didn't want to give up. I had evidence now, and a witness, and I wasn't going to let Myron Wilbershire lie to me any more. I marched up his shoveled walk and squatted on the top step of the porch. I figured I'd have to run for home by 7. My hair would be a mess, but at least I wasn't under the sun lamp. It was cold and dark sitting there, and not much light leaking from the house. I tried to remember being on that porch when I was 1 year old, tried to conjure up any recognition. What would it be like for a little girl to lose her mother? Wouldn't it be like playing peekaboo, and then one time, when you pull your hands from over your eyes, your mother was gone? Do you look around and keep expecting her to pop out and say, "Boo"? The next hour, the next week, the next year? When does a little girl quit expecting her mother to show up? How long does it take for a little girl to forget her? Does she ever? He scared the gumdrops out of me when he snapped on the porch light and opened the door. I jumped up and backed down the stairs. He could call the police and have me kicked off his property, but he hadn't, and that convinced me that he had something to hide. "Would you like to come in?" he said meekly with his deep voice. "Oh, I don't need to come in. You can talk to me out here." "Come in out of the cold," he said, and backed into the house, leaving the door open. Was he planning to murder me? I crept up the steps and peered in the door like a mouse approaching the trap. Past the entryway I could see a somber living room, crammed with old stuffed furniture, frilled lampshades. He was perched on the edge of an ugly green wing chair in front of a coffee table that had 2 cups and saucers, a pitcher of something, and a plate of cookies. Then he observed me, edging in, and he nodded. "Please close the door. Close the door." I was shaking, but I closed the door and kicked off my overshoes. Come in, come in. Have some hot cocoa if you'd like." I settled on the love seat across from him and left my coat and scarf on. He nodded at the food. "No thanks," I said, and I stayed as vigilant as a bird in case I had to run for my life. "My, aren't you a persistent young lady? As tenacious as a mosquito." He poured cocoa in both cups and took one in his hands. "I couldn't tell you the truth because I was hoping you'd give up and go away. I was praying I wouldn't have to bring it all up again. It was the most devastating time of my life, the most devastating." He took a sip of cocoa and cradled the cup in his hands. He glanced at me shyly, and it felt as if we were little kids playing tea time. "Can you imagine what it's like to be left behind by someone you dearly love?" he said. Yes, I was. Well, yes, well, your mother came to me when I worked in the pawn shop on 7th Street in downtown St. Paul. She was an angel, and I fell in love with her immediately, the moment I set eyes on her, before she ever spoke a word, before she ever spoke a word. He stared down at his cup, and I was all ears. He spoke slowly and echoed everything he said as if he liked the sound of his own voice. She'd run away from her husband. He was a drinker. He'd hurt her at times, and she was afraid for the baby, afraid for the baby. She wanted to pawn her wedding ring. It wasn't worth much. I didn't have the heart to tell her. Didn't have the heart. I don't think she had $2 to her name. I told her I'd lend her 30 on the ring, way more than I'd ever have sold it for. His voice grew thick, and I thought he was going to cry. I helped her find a boarding house for women, and I'd stop by every morning and evening to see how she was doing. She was having trouble with the baby at the boarding house, trouble with the baby, people complaining about crying at night and such. He bent over the coffee table and nodded. You sure you wouldn't like some cocoa to warm the bones? I figured if he was drinking it, it must be all right. I took a cup and drank. It was hot and sweet, and the cup warmed my hands. Thanks, I said, not wanting to interrupt his story. The money ran out. The money ran out, and I convinced her to come and live with me. I told her about the large house where she'd have several rooms and a bath to herself. She was leery, but she consented. She consented. She really didn't have anywhere else to go. She insisted on cleaning and cooking and doing laundry to earn her keep. She was an excellent cook. It was a wonderful arrangement, simply wonderful. I had that angel living with me in my own home, right in my own home. He took out his hanky and dabbed at the sweat on his large Charles Loudon face. Little by little, I let her know how much I loved her, how much I loved her, and almost every day I brought her little gifts, a flower, a candy bar, a magazine. She'd never tell me her last name. I think she was afraid her husband would find her. One night, while we were eating and the baby slept, I asked her to marry me. She told me she'd think about it, said she'd think about it. He got up and slowly paced as he talked. I didn't rush her, but after a few weeks we went to see a lawyer about her divorce. It would be hard to get, hard to get. Her husband lived in Iowa somewhere. She wouldn't tell me where, and he almost likely wouldn't consent. She had to show he had a drinking problem and had hurt her. I gave the lawyer $25 to work on it. She made me leave the office before she gave the lawyer her last name and where her husband lived in Iowa. I agreed that until she got the divorce, the lawyer would only talk to her, only talk to her. He stopped by the old mahogany dining table and timidly looked into my eyes. That lawyer was Arnold Shapiro, Mr. Arnold Shapiro. I almost swallowed my tongue. I set the cup down and nearly broke the saucer. Mr. Shapiro hadn't said anything about a divorce. If Myron Wilbershire had dealings with Mr. Shapiro before the adoption, maybe that's why Mr. Shapiro was remembering. That was his description could be from that meeting. I was crushed, and it must have shown because Myron sat down and didn't speak for several minutes. What happened to my mother? I said. My voice and hands were trembling. She consented to marry me, and we became lovers. I couldn't believe what good fortune had come to me, what good fortune. She was an angel, gorgeous, sweet, kind. I told her that when we were married, I'd adopt her baby. I was in paradise, the Garden of Eden, and then I fell into hell, fell straight into hell. He picked up a ginger snap, held it for a moment absent-mindedly, and gently set it back on the plate. I came home from work one night, early June. She was gone. She was gone, she and the baby. As suddenly as she'd come into my life, as suddenly as she'd gone. Just flew away, flew away. She left a note, said she was going back to her husband. I still have the note, still have the note. He pried himself out of the chair and lumbered over to an antique roll-top desk in a small den. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He gazed at it as if it were alive, while he shuffled back and then handed it to me and slumped into his chair. Dear Myron, I'll be gone when you find this. I'm going back to my husband. You and I just weren't meant to be together. I was looking for security for me and my baby, but I know it wasn't fair for me, and I could never love you the way you want me to. My daughter needs her father. I'm taking nothing but our clothes. I can never thank you enough for all you've done for us. Please forgive me for hurting you, Genevieve. The piece of white paper was finger-soiled and marked with water spots. I read it again, and then I set it on the coffee table. I felt goosebumps seeing my mother's handwriting, as if it verified that she really existed once, and was no longer only a figment of my hopes and dreams. I read the note 1,000 times that night, 1,000 times. Didn't sleep a wink. The following day was a Saturday, and I spent that day and the next searching both cities for her, bus depots, train stations, rooming houses. I was beside myself with shock and grief, beside myself. Twice I stood on the roof outside the third-story window and tried to jump. I searched for most of 5 days, hoping against hope that I would find her. His head had slumped, his chin on his chest. She was an angel, and I'm sure I'd die without her, simply die without her. I'd never known such joy and happiness, and I know I never will. No, I never will. I have it carved in my headstone, died June 4th, 1933. My stomach was dry, and I was breathing as though I'd run from Stillwater. We sat there without speaking, and my heart was breaking for Myron and how much he loved my mother. Then he rallied himself and straightened up on the edge of the chair. And that's why I lied to you. I couldn't bear to bring it up again. Bring it up again. And now you know no more than I do, no more than you, no more than you. I looked at him, and I wanted to hug him. I was happy deep inside because he wasn't my father. If he didn't sell me to Mr. Shapiro, it wasn't my father selling me. I'm sorry I couldn't be of more help, little mosquito, he sighed. Did my mother love me? She cherished you, thought the sun rose and set on you. I felt warm and happy. Did she go back to my father? I said. I don't know if she ever found him. Just don't know. I tried to get her last name from the lawyer, but he said that was privileged information and he couldn't give it to me. I offered him $50 and he took it, but he said that was a waste of money, just a waste of money. When I asked him why, he told me he could tell she made up a last name. Made up a name. Still too afraid of being found. When I asked him what name she gave him, he said Jones. He felt so cheap about it he gave me $25 back. A clock somewhere in the house chimed 7 o'clock. I have to go, Mr. Wilbershire. Thank you for telling me about my mother. I'm really sorry I made you go through it all again. Would it be all right if I stop by sometime, in case you think of something more? I've told you everything. Everything, so you needn't stop again. It would just stir up all the pain. I went to the foyer and pulled on my overshoes. He waited until I had them on and stood up. I find it hard to believe that you're that sweet little girl who crawled around these floors. Hard to believe. I can't remember, I said, and I smiled at him. Would you mind if I hugged you? He said bashfully. It would be like hugging your mother again. Hugging your mother again. It's okay. He hugged me to his powerful bear of a body, and I felt like a little girl in his arms. He had a manly scent, like oiled wood, and for an instant I panicked, helpless in his crushing grip. Then, just as suddenly, he set me free and pulled open the heavy door. Thank you, little mosquito, he said, and I hurried out into the brisk winter night. On the way home, I had to remember where I was going. He said my mother cherished me. Cherished me. I wanted to tell everyone on the streetcar, and I was trying to absorb all that I had heard. But all that stuff about Mr. Shapiro muddled the water. Maybe it wasn't Myron who sold me to Mr. Shapiro after all. And if not him, could it have been my mother? I felt queasy and kept getting up and changing seats. It was 7:20 and I had to beat Jim to my house. I knew I looked frazzled, but I didn't care. My mother cherished me, and I was close on her trail, as Myron would say. I laughed out loud when I imagined Miss Bellows trying to get Myron Wilbershire to read a page of Shakespeare.